When I find something I like, I stick to it. Basically, chunky, weird graphic novels about sapphics are kind of my brand. This next book sounds insane. Hey y'all, I'm Cece, and today I am here to talk about a few books that I have acquired over the last few months. We're gonna call it a summer haul. Maybe this gets into fall, but the point is I have a group of books I want to talk about, tell you about. If you want to support my book buying habit, then there are a few ways you can do that. Check out the links in the description. There are places where you can buy my art on prints and shirts and mugs and a bunch of that stuff. That's all available under the name Designed by Cece on Redbubble and in print, and you can also follow me at CCUing on Instagram for extra sneak peeks into what I'm reading or art that I am working on. If you like this content in general, subscribe, hang out more. I'm just saying that we're a pretty fun community and we read a lot of gay books. So today I have 22 books to talk about. They are mostly secondhand book buys. I do a lot of secondhand book buying in person at like the Goodwill or Value Village, but I also sometimes buy used books online. I've done this for years through places like Thrift Books or Abe Books or Book Outlet. I found a new one, I wanted to try it out. This isn't sponsored or anything, I just wanted to say that the first 12 books that I'm going to talk about are from Second Sale. They had an incredible deal. I think it's a regular deal that's still going where it's buy 3 books, get 1 free for any of their books under $10, which is a lot of their books. Mostly, I want to say my experience with Second Sale was pretty great. I knew the risks I was taking because I had at least the descriptions of what condition each of the books were in, so I was kind of taking my own gamble there, you know? And the thing is, I love books. I love physical books especially, but I am not that precious when it comes to the condition of those books. I like books that look read. When I started my degree in English, I was stalwart. I was not going to write in any books, and let me tell you, by the time I finished that degree, I had changed my tune, and also, I had stopped even using pencil. I'm not precious about my books. We get that. The point is, I got 12 from Second Sale. They had a deal going where any orders over $15 had free shipping, so total, it was about $45, which does work out to just under $4 a book. So. And way back when I did that original order, it was still Women in Translation Month. So I guess let's start with the 3 books that I got with that TBR in mind first. So first up we have Earth Eater. This is by Dolores Reyes and it is translated by Julia Sanchez. This is magical realism, dark fantasy, leaning into some horror-adjacent themes. It follows an unnamed narrator, a woman who is grieving, and along with that grief has come a new compulsion to eat Earth. And by following through on that compulsion, she learns that eating Earth gives her visions of the missing and the murdered. And she is from a slum in Argentina. It is a place where people go missing a lot and where accountability isn't high. So even though she wants to keep it a secret, it doesn't stay secret for long. I really like the idea of this and the idea of this whole community who is just desperate for answers. And now there's someone who can give them answers, but she is also completely consumed by her own grief. Also, this cover, I'm obsessed with it. Next up, I have a graphic novel. It is Amazona. This is by Canizales, and it was translated from Spanish by Sofia Huitron Martinez. So this is about a young grieving mother who was displaced from her home. She's now returning back to that land so that she can mourn her child, but she is also carrying a secret camera. She's hoping that she can record something as evidence to prove that illegal mining operations are taking place, because those are the operations that displaced her and her family. I really like the color scheme of this book, the fact that it's mostly monochromatic and there seem to be little elements of red or even pink. I'm a sucker for like any kind of color scheme used really effectively to tell a story, and I think that this sounds heartbreaking but beautiful. Last on the list of things that I got for Women in Translation Month, we have 9 Moons. This is by Gabriela Weiner, and it was translated by Jessica Powell. This is by a Peruvian journalist and essayist. It's nonfiction, and it is centered around the ideas of sex and motherhood and pregnancy specifically. There are 9 different essays, each related to a month of Gabriella's pregnancy with her first child. I've heard the essays are honest and funny and also sometimes really get to the heart of things that Gabriella didn't know about pregnancy before being pregnant. I do know this was released in 2009, and I think it may have some, like, 2009-y gender things. I believe there is supposed to be a foreword or an afterword in this that kind of covers the fact that the author at this point of time was really preoccupied with gender, but that does not reflect their experience now. I just kept seeing this book on Instagram and it was calling to me. I think it's really pretty, it's simple. Also, I love under the cover is so pretty. So next up, I have a little trio of books. They are all romance related, but they were also purchased with like specific rep in mind. I was looking for the romance and the representation. So first up, we have a YA contemporary, and that is Tilly in Technicolor by Maisie Eddings. I have been on the hunt for more books, especially romance books, with autistic leads, and this happens to have two neurodivergent leads. We have an ADHD lead and an autistic lead, which is my favorite pairing, which I know is shocking for someone with autism and ADHD. So this book is about Tilly, who is spending her first summer after high school as an intern for her older sister's startup, and apparently that means going on this huge trip that's gonna take her and her sister all across Europe. The thing is, there's another intern on this trip, and that is Oliver, and he immediately clashes with Tilly because they are very, very different. Oliver is autistic, he likes things a certain way, and he has a very specific plan for his life. Tilly is barely surviving after using way more energy than she could possibly have exerted to get through high school, so she's burnt out, she's messy, and she really has no idea what she wants to do next. A lot of reviews for this book talk about how healthy communication is such a big part of the relationship in this book and how it works between the two of them, which makes sense. You'd need it. But I really like that idea, and I have honestly been a bitch for any kind of book that's like let's have an excuse to travel across Europe. I'm into it. I just want to know. We stand neurodivergence fallen in love though, truly. Next up we have a book that I want to clarify. It did say on the website that this was like the lowest quality. I'm okay with it. It is water damaged. So this is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is a very popular romance book, and I was excited to be able to get the chance to read it. This features a main character with fibromyalgia, and for those of you who don't know, my best friend who I live with has fibromyalgia. Chronic pain rep is really difficult to find, so I've wanted to read this one for a while. I'm glad I got my hands on it. Basically, this is about Chloe, who has just had a near-death experience, and afterwards she's like, okay, I gotta get a life. But because she's who she is, she immediately makes a list of things that will mean she has gotten a life and gets to work. The first thing is that she moves out of her parents' house. Great. And after that, she gets kind of stalled. It turns out that even with a list, she's not that good at rebelling, so she's gonna need help. Luckily, the handyman in her new apartment building, they clash a lot. But Chloe is also maybe secretly spying on him through her window at night because he's maybe looks good and tattooed without a shirt on. One other thing I want to say about this, because I did start reading it, somehow in the years of reviews I heard about this book, I never picked up or had it click in my head that this is set in England, and I was reading the first chapter of this book and the dialogue like I was in the fucking Twilight Zone until someone asked for a cuppa, and I was like, oh. Yeah, that's some American brain bullshit, but there you go. And the last book in this little romance category is a little heavier than the other two. It is One Breath from Drowning. It's a novel, not romance specific, by Kent Quaney. Maybe Kent Quaney? So this is set in Sydney, Australia. It is contemporary fiction about two guys, Ryan and Sam, and it is about their relationship, but it's also about how that relationship kind of evolves as the two of them mature and go through different stages of life together, so it's like a parallel coming of age. So as for the specific reason I picked this up, Ryan is a lapsed Mormon from Utah. We'll get into it. He is an aspiring actor who up to this point has been in the closet, and then we have Sam, who's from Australia. He's an egotistical realtor who is just getting through life on his family's money and connections, and then these two happen to meet. I picked this up because I can't be an ex-Mormon lesbian for nothing. I have to at least be able to read about Mormon gays and judge. And one of the things that pinged early on for me is calling Ryan a lapsed Mormon. In Mormon circles, if you were going to church and then you're not going to church anymore, that's called being inactive. Very specific terminology. This is the kind of shit that I like to break down because, like I said, it had to be for something. So we'll see how that goes when I get to this one. Next up, we're going to get into some speculative stuff, some sci-fi, and we're going to start with Atomic Anna. This is by Rachel Barenbaum. So the thing is, earlier this year, I don't know what happened, but I really hyperfixated on HBO's Chernobyl. I watched it the year it came out, and I enjoyed it. And then earlier this year, I was like, I have to consume every part of that show again, frame by frame. That went on for a while. I don't really know why. The point is, my brain has been on Chernobyl a lot. And then, also earlier this year, I read a book called Permafrost, So, earlier this year I read a book called Permafrost, and this is set in very, very northern Russia, around the Arctic Circle. And I just felt like, when I read the description of Atomic Anna, it was like so many random things that I'd been really into lately, all in one book. So, let me tell you what it's about. Oh, it's also important to note that this is about time travel. Because this is about time travel. This is kind of a difficult one to follow in terms of synopses, so stick with me. So, we start with the Chernobyl disaster, which somehow coincides with a scientist named Anna being rocketed forward in time, all the way to 1991, just in time to see her estranged daughter, Molly, die. Before she dies, Molly asks her mother for 3 things. 1, go back in time and stop the Chernobyl disaster. Easy, Molly, thank you. 2, save Anna's granddaughter's life. And 3, put their family in general on a better path than they are currently on. So this is about 3 women in 3 different periods of time working across time to stop the Chernobyl disaster. But I believe it's also kind of asking questions about, if you can change time, should you? I love time travel. I love anything getting into the morality of time travel. Permafrost was about the idea of paradoxes and working through those, and I was fascinated by that. So like I said, when I read this book, and I was like, okay, time travel book about Chernobyl, it just felt like when I read this book, it had all of these things about it that lined up perfectly. So I think this is set in and around mostly what is Ukraine, but also it seems like the granddaughter is in America. It says she's in Philadelphia, so I'm not really sure how we got there, but I'm curious. I love stories about women and time travel, and I'm really interested in Chernobyl, apparently. And this is chunky, too. I'm a little worried about that. This next book sounds insane. The Velocity of Revolution by Marshall Ryan Marquesa. Oh, Maresca. By Marshall Ryan Maresca. So this is diesel punk, which is the same genre as Mad Max, if you know the Mad Max movies. That's diesel punk. This is set in a war-torn future world that is ruled by foreign invaders. And what's really cool is that these invaders have created a deeply intense caste system. And this new caste system, the people who just got invaded, they get to be at the very, very bottom of the pile. Even with this happening, though, there's a regular, rebellion effort going on. People are fighting against this invading government and whatever it means for them. And the government is just doing their best to shut down that rebellion, which is how we meet our first main character, whose name is Wenthy. Wenthy has been assigned to infiltrate a rebel cycle group so that he can get key intel, and to give him the best possible chance to make sure that he knows as much as he possibly can, we've turned to forbidden magic, and Wenthy connects his brain to someone from the rebel group. So the rebel whose brain he's now tied to is a recently captured rebel named Nalia, and now Wenthy has access to her memories, her thoughts, intel about the rebellion, but he also has access to all of her emotions and all of the indignity she feels for having her knowledge used this way. And if you can believe it, having that constant voice in his head saying that this is really, really messed up, it starts to kind of sway Wenthy. I don't think I've ever read any dieselpunk before, I've only seen it, but I'm so excited to get into some, like, motorcycle gangs and apocalypse stuff. The other thing I read is that apparently everybody in this book is pansexual and poly, so, like, y'all probably know this by now, but I'm very into the idea of, like, consciousness sharing or mind connection in books. It's a trope that really rings a lot of bells. I enjoy it, and on top of that, it's in a ridiculous, insane, post-apocalyptic, pansexual, poly world. I honestly don't know how I haven't seen this book everywhere. The next book that I want to talk about, I'm going to cover more in my next wrap-up, and it is also the book that I would say I'm the least happy with in terms of condition. I knew I was getting used books. I'm a little annoyed that it doesn't have a dust jacket. Like, I can remove library bindings and stuff. I can't print a dust jacket. It's fine. We move forward. This is Salvation Day by Callie Wallace. It is a sci-fi horror set in space. Basically, there is this group who is trying to get on board a ship that was abandoned 10 years earlier when a virus got out and killed everybody on board. The ship has been floating there as just like this cemetery in space, and now a rebel group wants it. But when they break in, along with a very, very important hostage, it turns out that the virus was way more messed up than anyone had any idea about, and it becomes a desperate fight for survival. I really love the two different points of view that we get for this book. It just leads to a lot of really interesting tension as you get to know about the world through each of the leads' perspectives, because you know that neither one of them can be 100% right, but also it's very clear that both of them are very wrong about some stuff. And I love that while this is split between those two perspectives, this isn't a romance. The leader of the rebel group is Zara, and then let's see, Jazz. Jazz is the other narrator, and he is gay and has kind of a maybe flirtatious thing going on with his best friend, who was also taken hostage to the terrifying spaceship full of dead bodies. There's not, like, a ton of time to flirt, but that is there. Because of how much I love this book, I immediately put Callie Wallace's other space horror on my TBR. I believe it's called Dead Space. I think it's also set on a spaceship. When I find something I like, I stick to it. I want more. It's like when I read fan fiction. I'm gonna go to the tag and I'm just gonna keep reading slightly different versions of the same story over and over again. Also, and I'll show this more in my wrap-up again, I think it's really funny how many notes I had to take. Moving right along, we have Break the Bodies, Haunt the Bones. This is by Micah Dean Hicks. It's also horror, dark fantasy. It's really more paranormal horror, and it is set in a town called Swine Hill, where the ghosts live alongside the dead. And these ghosts are not just observers, they have a lot of control and impact on the people that they are haunting. In this, we are following a family, all of the different members, and each of them has a different ghost that's kind of causing them a specific issue or is making their life more difficult in some way. I think we might be following some other characters as well as the family, but just learning more about this town and all of the different people who live there. So this weird, dark, atmospheric book is also about economic anxiety and a struggle that happens when newcomers start snatching up the last jobs in town, and this creates even more tension between all of the residents, living and dead. Mostly I love a book that defies explanation, and this one, I'll admit, was pretty hard to parse down and describe. I know it's gonna be dark and heavy, but I'm also fascinated by this world, and I found this originally on a list of queer horror, so I assume we're gonna get at least one queer narrator. Fun fact, this book was in full library binding when it came to me from Second Sale, and I have just mostly removed it, so take a look. This is the main thing left, and, you know, I can't exactly remove the stamp. I just feel like this could be gorgeous, so I'm glad that I have a copy. Next up, we have a book called The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. I bought this book because I love Caitlin Starling. I'm gonna get her book. So Caitlin Starling wrote The Luminous Dead, which is a book I happen to love. Sci-fi horror, cave exploration, not being able to trust your own brain, sapphic. Caitlin Starling has had a few other books come out since then, and the only thing I've been able to read from her is her novella, which I believe it was called Yellow Jessamine, and the atmosphere of that book was divine. It was so gothic, and this is heavily inspired by the Guillermo del Toro movie Crimson Peak, so I think gothic is definitely going to be maintained as a theme. So this is set in a dark mirror version of post-war London. I'm telling you what it says. I don't know what that means. This is about a woman named Jane. She is intensely logical and knows that in order to survive in the society that she's in, she has to marry well. She happens upon a dashing but reclusive doctor and decides he is the one, makes it all happen. They're married. The only deal is don't go into his creepy house at the edge of town. That's it. So, she goes to the creepy house at the edge of town, and there she finds a very different version of her husband, a version who's gone the next morning, and now Jane is interested. She thought she could marry well and then maybe move forward, but now it's about what secrets her husband is keeping and what exactly is in that creepy house. Alright, last up from this second sale stack, we have the other library-bound book that I have not had the chance to de-library-ify yet. So I'm going to try to turn this so it isn't caught in a reflection. This is Forget This Ever Happened by Cassandra Rose Clark. It is a YA, you're never going to believe this, dark fantasy with horror themes. So this is set in 1993. Summer break. Claire is in Indianola, Texas, and she is taking care of her mean-ass grandma. And it all seems kind of terrible except for one thing, which is that the town only seems to exist when you're in it, and when you leave, you can't remember it at all. The summary also talks about fissures in time and space, lizards that talk, and a potentially really sweet sapphic romance, which is every kind of fabulous. It's giving me a lot of the same vibes as Are You Listening by Tilly Walden, which is like a surreal road trip, Thelma and Louise graphic novel. Also kind of reminds me of Welcome to Night Vale, in that it's a little desert town that has some weird stuff going on and doesn't make sense. I wonder what Carlos the Scientist would make of a town that only exists when you're in it. So that is the end of my second sale haul. Like I said, those are the 12 books, about $45. But since we're already talking about surreal and sapphic, I thought we would move on to The Deep Dark by Molly Knox Ostertag. It's chonky, but I support Molly through anything. I would read whatever, and a lot of you have been telling me I would love this graphic novel. So this book is about a character named Mags who has been forced by life to grow up just way too fast. She has a job, she has school, she is the sole caretaker for her abuela, and she has another secret, which is a thing living in her basement. Something that needs to feed on her to stay alive. And then into this sort of dour situation walks Mag's childhood friend Nessa. And she marks this moment where not only does Mag start thinking about their time growing up together and the kind of life that they had, it's also a moment where she finally starts to think about a future again. But still, there is that thing in the basement. I mentioned earlier that I really love graphic novels that use color in interesting ways, and that is another thing that I've heard great things about in terms of this graphic novel. I believe that it just uses color more to start illustrating Mags becoming herself again, starting to plan and hope, and also I believe the flashbacks are in color, and I think that that's really beautiful. This is supposed to be more eerie and atmospheric than scary. There are themes of self-love and self-harm. It's very The Babadook coded to me, personally. I don't know if that's like a common thing. Basically, chunky, weird graphic novels about sapphics are kind of my brand, so I'm really glad to finally have this, and I'm really hoping that I can get The Girl from the Sea, which is one of Molly's other graphic novels. I love the Witch Boy series. I just want more. I want more. Next up, I have a little middle grade book that was sent to me by the author, and that is A Sky Full of Dragons by Tiffany McDaniel. This is the first book in the Wand Keepers series, and Tiffany was so sweet. She signed this and sent it to me. Let's see if I can grab Tiffany's other book. So Tiffany McDaniel is probably better known for her adult fiction. Her debut was a book called The Summer That Melted Everything, which I love. I believe there's also one called Betty and another one called On the Savage Side that are both very well reviewed. I read The Summer That Melted Everything as one of my very first ever early copies. It was as an ebook, and it is so genuinely cool to see all of the different stories that Tiffany has written since then. Like, I just have very fond memories of this being one of those early books that meant a lot to me. Tiffany's middle grade debut sounds completely adorable. It is about a girl named Spella who was found in a cauldron as a baby and adopted by the woman that she comes to know as Aunt Cauldron Eyes. They have a happy little house together in the woods. Aunt Cauldron Eyes teaches Spella how to make hats for magical creatures. And then at age 8, Spella receives an invitation to Dragon's Knob, which is a school for wand witchery and wizardry. But on the exact night that Spella is supposed to leave for school, Aunt Cauldron Eyes is kidnapped, and Spella is forced to rely on a bunch of brand new classmates to hopefully save the day. The reason I even started reading in general is because I loved middle grade fantasy, so I was so pleased that Tiffany was able to send this my way, and that it's signed. I think it looks like a lot of fun and a really cool start to a little middle grade fantasy series. Moving on, we have The Troop by Nick Cutter. I have seen Nick Cutter's name popping up more and more as I've done research into horror books that I should be reading. Apparently TikTok really loves him. I grabbed this at Half Price Books along with the next couple books I'm going to show you, and I just wanted to get a feel for Nick Cutter's style because I'm curious in his other books, The Deep and The Handyman Method, and I don't know what this one is that looks so Yellow Jackets coded I can't even handle it, but I want to read it. This is about a scoutmaster who takes a group of boys on a trip into the Canadian wilderness, and then a stranger stumbles into camp, and he doesn't look good, and he brings with him a really fun infection that turns into a fight for survival, and from what I'm told, is supposed to be super gross. Everyone who tells me about this book is like, but don't read it if you don't like gross. I haven't gotten there yet. I'm only 30 pages in, but feels like a lot of warnings. What's gonna happen to these people? Also at Half Price Books, I got Siren Queen by Niveau. This is set in pre-code Hollywood, which is end of the 20s, very early 30s. So this is about a young Chinese-American actress who is coming of age in pre-code Hollywood, and she is just trying to make it as a star. She's willing to do whatever it takes to get there, even though this version of Hollywood is run on blood and dark magic. A lot of reviews for this book talk about the main character being like ruthless or intense, which are big things for me that I love, so I'm into that. Plus, she's a lesbian. So am I, if you didn't know. Speaking of lesbians, we have another one here, A Master of Jin. This is by P. Djeli Clark. I have read one book, a novella by P. Djeli Clark. It was called The Haunting of Tramcar 015. It was amazing, and it is set in the same universe as this book right here. This is set in an alternate version of Cairo in 1912. It is a version of Cairo that is full of magic, and they have used that magic to their advantage. They're able to stop and then start removing colonial European intervention in their society, and in this version of the world, Egypt is a huge superpower. This is about a woman named Fatma who is an investigator, and she gets assigned to this case. It's a murder case, but also it's related to this man who has come forward and said that he is the one who 50 years ago parted the veil between the magical and mundane worlds. And that doesn't really seem likely, but also investigation is necessary. Also, she has a girlfriend. She's a lesbian. I loved The Haunting of Tramcar 015. It was so cool. It was like a Monster of the Week kind of book where you just get thrown into a world, and these two guys who are like, oh yeah, there's a haunting at a tram car. That's us. I love that vibe. I love that energy. I really love P. Djeli Clark. Next up, we have a couple of Tor.com novellas because I am nothing if not consistent, and I will buy any Tor.com novella. So, we have All Systems Red. This is by Martha Wells and is the first in the Murderbot Diaries. Everyone ever has recommended this. It is about an AI who has basically hacked its way into self-awareness, and with all that free will and time, basically they just want to be left alone to watch TV. This AI has named itself Murderbot, and I am obsessed with the line that the summary starts with, on Goodreads at least, which is, "As a heartless killing machine, I was a complete failure." Basically, Murderbot talks a big game about not really caring about us fleshy humans, and then their team gets called into action to something really dangerous, and all of a sudden, they kind of care what happens to their little humans. This is supposed to be adapted soon. I'm very excited. I wanted to get on the train of people who love Murderbot, and while I had heard of that one a lot, I had absolutely never heard of The Lamb Will Slaughter the Lion by Margaret Killjoy. It's a quick little one. I will show you what I saw first about this. Margaret Killjoy's Danielle Kane series is a dropkick in the mouth anarcho-punk fantasy that pits traveling anarchist Danielle Kane against vengeful demons, hypocritical ideologues, and brutal, unfeeling officers of the law. So this is apparently about a girl named Danielle who is on a road trip. She is dealing with the recent death of her best friend, and she goes into this town, and they have just summoned themselves a protector spirit. As you do, you know, to serve as their judge and executioner, like every town needs. And Danielle shows up just in time for this lovely spirit to turn on its summoners. The fact that this was called, like, queer and punk, and there's creepy deer imagery. I watched Hannibal for a lot of years. I love a creepy deer. I got those two from Value Village, and while I was there, I also picked up We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. This is a classic. Shirley Jackson wrote The Haunting of Hill House, which I love. I love the book. I am obsessed with the show on Netflix to a degree that is probably unhealthy. But then if you look at my reading history, it seems like Gothic has always been my thing, and that it just makes my brain dance around in my head a little bit. I have never read this. I've also never seen an adaptation, so that will be fun. I believe this is about a girl named Maricat? Peculiar girl named Maricat and her family's dark secret. Besides being the author of The Haunting of Hill House, Shirley Jackson's short story, The Lottery, was my personal short story you read in English class that changes you as a person. So I think it's just clear that Shirley Jackson has my number. And I'm good with that. Let's keep it going. Okay, last two things on this list. When I went to get my hair done in Seattle, the incredible hair salon that I went to happened to share a building with an independent bookstore called Nook and Cranny, and it was amazing. I literally went and talked to the owner to tell them how impressed I was with their selection, because it was gorgeous. I wound up getting 2 books. I could have gotten so many more. I also got this cute little recycled bag. Isn't it fun? I like it. So the first thing that I got is a novella. It's called You Should Have Left by Daniel Kellman. This is translated from German by Ross Benjamin. Came with a little bookmark for Nook and Cranny, which I thought was pretty cute. I have been on the hunt, as usual, for horror and especially weird horror sci-fi novellas. This happens to fit the bill. It is an eerie supernatural tale of a writer's mental collapse, I believe? Emotional collapse. Well, it's written in the form of a diary. We start as our main character has taken his wife and child on this vacation so that he can have the space and time to write. Sir, do you realize that you're literally doing The Shining? Anyway, they're in this house in the mountains of Germany, and stuff starts getting weird and he starts losing his mind. Because that's literally how you get The Shining! I picked this up without realizing that it was already on my Goodreads TBR with a different cover. I had just seen that cover so many times that it didn't even click that this had the same title, but I got home, looked it up, and I was so pleased because I really wanted to read this and see, just how bad this goes for everybody. And the last thing that I picked up, for this haul in general, but also the last thing from that independent bookstore, is The Gilda Stories. This is by Jewel Gomez, and this is a bit of 90s classic lesbian lit. It was originally released in 1991. It starts in 1850s Louisiana, but it's stretched across time, and it is about a black lesbian vampire, and it is also really about a community and a chosen family that you kind of create. I love that idea. Plus, it's sexy. Vampires are sexy. And here's the thing. The first vampire book, okay? The first vampire book was about lesbians. So it just makes sense that we could keep that going. We have a history, and that history is sexy blood-sucking. Wait, I'm just really into the idea of redefining family and creating a community of your, like, vampire people. I think that's a cool concept, and I am always trying to track down more classic lesbian lit, so I was really, really happy that I was able to find this one, and that I was able to explore Nook and Cranny in general, because I'm definitely going there again. Oh my good god, okay, that is all of the books that I have to talk about. Thank you for hanging out with me while I talked through these books. If there are any that sounded particularly interesting, let me know down in the comments below what you added to your TBR, what I should prioritize, and which ones I should be reading first. Also, do you ever get stuck in a reading zone where you just want to read the same thing but kind of different over and over again, or is that just me? I am settling in, getting ready to do some reading vlogs. There's already one on my channel. If you didn't catch it, go watch it. It's new. It's autumnal and it's full of art and books, but I am working on something else next that is going to be related to The Haunting of Hill House. So if you've been kind of into the theme of gothic books as we've been going through this list, maybe stick around for that vlog coming soon. Anyway, thanks y'all for watching, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!